Maggie, we're really pleased that you've taken time out of your busy schedule here at the conference to come up to the Penthouse Suites here in the Francis Marion to chat with us. We very much appreciate that.
It's good to be here, Tom. Thank you for the invitation.
It's our pleasure. Last year at this time, you were the Dean of Libraries in the upstate here in South Carolina at Clemson University. And then recently you moved to take the same position actually at the University of Las Vegas, or the University of Nevada at Las Vegas.
Yes.
And what caused you to make the change? What is it about UNLV that is so unique that drew you out there?
Sure. Well, I should mention that it was a privilege to work at Clemson University, and the upstate is a beautiful location in South Carolina. I know we focus so much on the low country, but the upstate is a fascinating part of our country and of the state and a rich history. So it was a privilege to work at Clemson University. And I have to say, I'm still a Tiger fan, still rooting on the football champions. And I do miss many aspects of Clemson. But primarily moving back to the Southwest. Southwest is home for myself, for my family. I have relatives in Las Vegas and Phoenix. The opportunity to work with UNLV was very enticing. Their focus on instruction, supporting research were other aspects that were a match for my particular career goals. I mean, it was a very, very difficult decision, but I'm glad to be back home.
That's perfectly understandable.
Mm-hmm.
You noted that UNLV plays a strong role supporting economic development and community development.
Exactly.
Can you expand how the library does that in UNLV, and how about Clemson? Was that a part of your mandate or your activities when you were there?
Well, I've been fortunate to work at a number of land-grant institutions, and I believe that the land-grant mission has shaped me as a librarian as well as a dean and administrator within higher education. So I think successful universities are those universities that partner with their community and with their state. I also believe that the most successful libraries, whether they're academic or public, are those that are connected with the goals and the issues and what is happening within that community. And they're driving library programs, services, and all aspects of librarianship to supporting those community issues. So for UNLV is not a land grant. However, UNLV is very committed to Southern Nevada and the economic driver, or the economic development of Southern Nevada. So UNLV has a unique mission, I think, for being a land grant university, and that they are concerned about the workforce for the area, helping to drive innovation and creativity within Southern Nevada. At UNLV, I can tell you a little bit about some of the work that we are doing within the libraries to support that university effort.
Please.
And that has to do with making sure that our students have the skill sets that they need to be successful, not only as academic students, but also within their careers. So that's the reason why the instruction program is so vital at UNLV. We want to make sure that our students have those critical thinking, the information literacy skills that they need to be successful in their careers. But in addition, the library is very much interested in documenting the history of Southern Nevada. So our special collections is unique in that we're collecting the history of the gaming industry, the economic development, because that will help us understand our past to prepare for the future. In addition, UNLV has a mission of becoming a top-tier university, and that involves research. It's not totally around research, but moving from an R2 to an R1 university. So within the libraries, we are building the infrastructure to support that research mission, and that spills over to the economic development within the community.
Can you just talk a little bit more about preparing the students to enter the workforce and assessing that?
That's a great question, and it's something that libraries have been involved in for many years, and I think that we're getting better at the assessment portion. So at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, we are deeply engaged with the instruction program, with core curriculum, to make sure that we're embedded within the core curriculum to build those information literacy skills. Then we are working on a study with the Greater Western Library Alliance to measure that impact. So we want to know, are students better with information literacy, understanding information, applying information as a result of going through our instruction program? And our early indicators are yes, that it's statistically significant and that we are preparing our students to have higher grades, to be more successful in the classroom. We believe that that will contribute to their retention, also their progress to graduation. So there is a lot of work that's being done in this area by academic libraries, and I'm glad that UNLV is part of the broader mission of academic libraries in this area.
Thanks. That's great.
What kind of data, just a follow-up to Albert's question, what kind of data are you turning to prove that the library is having this kind of impact on student success?
Sure. I believe our instruction librarian would be better versed at this than I am, Tom. But what we are doing is that we are looking at citations of students after they have gone through an instruction program. We're looking at papers, and we're working closely with the faculty. And part of the GWILA study is a study of universities within the Greater Western Library Alliance to see not only is UNLV having success in this area, but what other universities are doing as well. So it's a large study. And there are other similar studies that are looking at circulation patterns, looking at tutoring and so forth. So by being able to assess, as opposed to counting how many students go through an instruction program, but looking to see what that value of library instruction is, then I believe we have a story that we can tell university administrators about how the libraries are contributing to student success. And you both know that academic libraries or academic institutions are very focused on retention, progression, and completion.
Yes.
So the libraries undertaking that same issue and contributing to the success of the university means that the libraries are a vital part of that education mission of the broader university.
Aside from the economic development part of your what you perceive as your mission, and then the community part of it, what other key goals do you have for your library? 3 or 4 key goals.
Sure. I want to talk a little bit about what makes UNLV unique. So we know academic libraries that, in fact, we were discussing it this morning regarding the Internet Archive, that we are collecting a lot of the same materials. We have access to a lot of the same materials, which is good. And thankfully, technology and hopefully better pricing, better access means that we have access to the world's information. What will make every library distinct from one another are those unique contributions to knowledge. So for UNLV, it's about documenting the history of Southern Nevada and the unique resources that we have that no other library has. So focusing on those distinctive collections. They might be special collections, archival collections, they might be press collections by the university press, unique research by the students, by the faculty, by focusing on what makes that university different from other universities is what libraries will need to do. And then through our digitization, through open educational resources, open access materials, and pulling that information together, we're contributing to the knowledge of the world. So what we are focusing focusing on at UNLV, very similar to other academic libraries, but those distinct collections, those unique collections, and then a variety of strategies that make it accessible not only for the university, but indeed the world.
To change the subject a little bit,
Okay.
a little while ago you were part of a panel that talked about library vendor relationships. Not to go into depth, but could you review some of the elements of that, of successful partnerships and some of the challenges?
Sure. So I have worked with Barb Kavetsky and Rick Branham before on this topic, and how to work closely with vendors to move it from a commercial relationship to more of a partnership relationship. And that's another unique aspect of the Charleston Conference, because the Charleston Conference brings together publishers and librarians, and it's an opportunity for us to really engage about common issues and work together to solve some of the problems that we see. So kudos to the Charleston Conference. But we talked a bit about what type of relationships exist, and it runs the gamut from very informational to a deep development partnership. There are a variety of tools that you can use to foster that partnership. And as you well know, technology enables us to work with partners from across the globe. So that enables that relationship. But the elements of that partnership really depend on what the relationship or the project is, communication, getting the right people involved, and then making sure that you're focused on the end result and the ultimate goal. We also talked a little bit about how partnerships can ebb and flow. They can end. They can end because it's just natural to end. They can end because the relationship falls apart, or there are other dynamics. So we talked a little bit about why a partnership would end, and hopefully the communication is strong so that you're ending on a good note, and there might be a chance for a future partnership.
I would think that being very clear at the beginning of goals, of mileposts, would really make it work more smoothly if everyone, you may be more verbose in your notes and these things, but I always felt that work was very valuable up front, so there's no confusion as things go on.
I agree. It is defining what that relationship is, expectations, goals, timelines, whether there's an MOU, exchange of funds. I think it goes beyond a licensing, and to where, particularly if it's a very close development relationship. So what are the parties bringing to the table? What are your expectations? How will you communicate? How will you resolve problems? All of that. It's almost like a marriage contract, isn't it?
Libraries are more apt to partner with other libraries and other educational institutions. Why would they partner with a vendor? What's really in it for a library to partner with a vendor? And on the other side, why would a vendor partner with a library? What would make it productive for them to do that?
Sure, Tom, that's a great question. So for a library, it might be about bringing in expertise that the library or the university lacks. It might bring a broader perspective. So one thing that I have done in the past is worked with a vendor that I trusted in terms of, what do you know about this vendor? What have you heard? What about this software? So understanding that our vendors can be our partners in a very informal way, but they can also be our partners in a very formal way. But the vendors bring deep expertise about technology, what is happening in the broader technology world or publishing world. And they also know other libraries that might be working on a similar project, so they bring that expertise. For a vendor, what a library brings to that partnership is is this a realistic project? Does it work For instance, if you're in a development relationship, is this practical? How are the costs? What type of expertise does the library need in order to implement a software or to implement a service? So having that communication, particularly in a development relationship, both the vendor and the library are communicating about the issues that are before them, and hopefully they're solving the issues. And if they're able to do that, for instance, in a pilot relationship, then the vendor and the library might be able to take that and scale it up to other libraries or other services that a vendor might offer.
From your experience and perspective, are there any success stories you can point to where library-vendor partnerships have been successful?
I can. So in my past life, before I was a dean, I did a lot of work with integrated library systems, which have now morphed more into library services platforms. And I remember a large contract that I had when I was at Montana State, and sitting down with the vendor and saying, we're not just going to buy an integrated library system. We want a partner who will help us to develop our services and our programs, and we commit to you that we'll help in the development of the software. And I'm really dating myself here, but I remember when we said, we want to use the web interface as the default interface. You know, I'm really dating myself. So there are probably individuals out there going, what? No. So
We understand.
Exactly. So in the days of client versus web applications, and we said we wanted to use a web interface, not a client. And we were the first library to use a web interface in the library as well as external to the library. And the vendor was like, why would you want to do that? Wouldn't you want, something that's more responsive? And we said, no, we were looking ahead to mobile technologies. So that because we had that relationship, that it was more than a commercial relationship, we felt as though they were looking for the same goals that we were looking for. And now we know that web interface is standard. So that's an example of us taking a commercial relationship and really forming more of a partnership.
So those are examples of fairly high-level projects. I was acquisitions librarian, and every day I had relations with vendors at a much lower level. And whereas a lot of these can be complementary, we're developing together a new project that can be scalable.
Yes.
They're not always complementary goals. I think of journal contracts and the like, where they can be oppositional, and how sometimes you just can't go forward.
That's correct.
And how do you tread on those waters, especially on important projects?
Understanding the motivation of each individual or entity within any sort of agreement is helpful. It's almost like buying a car. You know the vendor wants to sell you a product, and you know how much money you have. So sometimes it does feel like you're buying a used car. This is what I'm willing to pay. This is what it costs. Understanding that, I think, is important for any type of relationship. So we know that a vendor may not be a partner. It may be a commercial relationship. So it's good to understand that. Regardless of whether it's a commercial relationship or a partnership, I think for librarians to be direct in their communication, upfront, to bring the right individuals to the table. So, for instance, I am involved in some negotiation with vendors, and other negotiations I don't need to be at the table. So, understanding who will be working on that relationship. Also, I think, and we didn't have time to talk about it in our program, but how do you use time with vendors at conferences? Do you go out to dinner with a vendor or not? Do you go to a reception or not? If you do, what are your goals? Do you host a vendor at your institution? And by hosting, I mean not just inviting the vendor to come in, but maybe paying for the dinner so that you're on a level playing field. And I think it comes down to communication and relationships. I've seen relationships that start off in a very adversarial, and by continuing to know the vendor, understand where they're coming from, being upfront. In some cases, I've been able to change that to a more reciprocal relationships. Others, I have not. Sometimes players change where perhaps I've worked well with one vendor and then not so much later, and I'm sure the same thing happens for vendors. But I think understanding ultimately the vendor's perspective and the library's perspective, and just being humane and working with vendors, then hopefully it works, and when it doesn't, it doesn't.
Right. You've also mentioned that these kinds of partnerships can lead to really some solid innovation. And I was wondering again, are there any specific examples that you can point to? And from UNLV's perspective, are there some things that you're looking at that you think some partnerships that you're looking at that you think will stimulate some of this kind of innovation?
Exactly. Well, I'll address the latter portion of your question first, Tom. So, being new at UNLV, so I've been there for 3 months, the vice president for research and the provost have asked the libraries to step up and to help them solve the research life cycle. So how can the libraries help throughout the entire research life cycle for our faculty and for our students? And that is a huge challenge. And, at the Charleston conference, we've been talking about research information management systems or processes. So personally, what I am looking for are partners or a partner to help us examine every step in the research life cycle of a UNLV faculty member and how the libraries can contribute to the success. So we have pieces and parts within librarianship now, for instance, data management plans, institutional repositories, open access, our impact data, as well as altmetric. But how do we pull that together so that a faculty member can move seamlessly from the idea stage all the way to the publication and hopefully the replication of their research? So that's an area that I am looking to solve at UNLV, and I can tell you that the libraries, we lack all of the expertise. We have some of the pieces and parts, but we also know some of our vendors who are here at Charleston and in librarianship, as well as within higher education, have that expertise. So we'll be looking for partners to help us solve that. And I know we're not alone because it's been a popular topic this year at Charleston. So,
Are there other innovations that you've heard of from other schools that have resulted from this kind of relationship?
I've heard some examples of research information management. I've heard it at University of Michigan, Syracuse University, and there was also a presentation by a university in Australia. Okay. So those are great examples. OCLC has just released a study on research information management, and so we'll be taking a close look at the universities involved in that study to see what we can replicate. And then hopefully our experience will contribute to the greater knowledge of librarianship.
Albert, we oftentimes like to end our interviews with a question. It's not really a trick question, but I'll ask it.
Okay.
If you were sitting in Albert's chair, or if you were sitting in my chair, what question would you ask yourself?
I think it has to do with the role of academic libraries in the future. And as a dean of library, my challenge is not solving the problems of today, but solving the problems of tomorrow. So what does UNLV need in 5 years? What do academic libraries, all libraries need in 5 years, not today? How do we serve those millennials? How do we serve students who are coming up now through the pipeline? So that's the question that I would ask of myself, and I think it's an expectation that we all have of our academic leadership.
You've asked the question.
Now I have to answer it. So it goes back to the beginning of our conversation. So where do we see academic libraries? And I see them integral within the instruction mission. One aspect we have not talked about are the learning that happens in libraries. And that's what's so exciting about being an academic librarian today, is because our libraries are just happening places. It is truly where learning is occurring. So it's thinking about our spaces, our collections, and how we're working with students. The other aspect is, how do we create new knowledge, and that knowledge in a variety of formats? So one thing we didn't talk about, we talked about distinct collections. But we also know that knowledge is not necessarily in print. It's not necessarily electronic. It's 3D, it's audio, it's video. And so at UNLV, we're in the process of creating a knowledge production lab. And we want to be able to support students that we know in 5 years that they will be accessing print collections, digital collections, videos, audio. They'll be doing 3D printing. And then we also want to help them. How do you visualize that report? And then the challenge for us is, how do we collect all of that new knowledge? That knowledge won't be in a book. It won't be electronic in a journal. It might be a database. It might be an image. It might be combining that. So where I see the future of academic libraries are building the skill sets of our librarians and building our services to collect all sorts of knowledge.
Does that include creating and enhancing institutional repositories to store some of that information?
Absolutely. And we know that our institutional repositories are very effective in collecting written word, so to speak. But our institutional repositories allow us to collect digital images and to collect, for instance, performances and music and audio collections. It also allows us to bring together disparate collections. So an example from UNLV is working with PBS. We did a study on the African American experience in Las Vegas. So we could bring together oral histories, we could bring together photographs, we could bring together our archives, and we could tell the story about African Americans. We have a similar project working with the Jewish heritage within Las Vegas. And by pulling that together in a new way, we're creating that new knowledge and telling a story that otherwise would be difficult to tell.
Well, it's an exciting new role for libraries.
It
if we can
is.
pursue that and make that work, that's
It's
tremendous.
a great time to be a librarian, because I think technology enables us to achieve part of our mission that perhaps was difficult before.
And in a way, it's our core mission to navigate or to assist our patrons, our users, our students, faculty, to find this stuff, put it together, and send the students as graduates out with that knowledge.
Absolutely.
Which is just evolving now.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Maggie. We appreciate you coming by and again taking time
Thank
out
you.
of what must be a pretty hectic schedule. We really are appreciative that you did that, came by. I enjoyed it and learned a tremendous amount.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.